Hey there, School of Tomorrow people. This video is specifically relating to the School of Tomorrow, and if you're not aware of that school or enrolled in it, not to worry. It's just I'm not going to preface this with a lot of explanation, since those who are specifically um, served by this video already know what I'm talking about. But what none of you might quite get is how movie making fits in. Now, a movie is just a frame of time, energy, expense, right? It takes time to spend energy. The rate at which you spend energy is called power. And you can tell when a movie is unrealistic, quote unquote, because you'll see like power we don't have. If it's running too fast, those horses could never pull that weight that fast and stuff like that. So, there's a lot of scale involved too in what you're capable of. An ant can carry several times its body weight. That has something to do with the scale it's operating on. It's not just that ants are super strong, and that if you made an insect as big as a building, it would be that much stronger. No, some of these designs just fall apart at a different scale. Important to understand. So, in the movie making vein, I found this web page actually was brought to my attention because we're working on Old Man River City as a city from scratch concept. It's from the Bucky Fuller literature, of course, which is what we're studying. While I wait for that to load, BDO have project completion cycle. GST is pretty important to how we think around here. It has to do with, first of all, we understand that energy runs downhill just like water, and the Earth is recipient of certain frequencies, and it emanates also, it rebroadcasts or reflects. It takes in a lot of energy. It also gives off a lot of energy. If it didn't, it would just get hotter and hotter. And thanks to the biosphere, we have like energy processing going on. Now, humans did not play a role in that for millions of years, billions of years. And so when money pops up inside the human scenario, sometimes there's a sense that, well, we can't pay for anything if we don't have money. But of course, nature has never had money. It's never been about money to create planet Earth or the humans on it, right? God did not say, let me have a bank account so I can afford to create the world. I'll borrow it, and, maybe in some Gnostic tale that would be more apropos, where a sub-deity with a misguided sense of grandiosity steals too much energy and makes a world before they're ready. It's an immature world. That's more of a Gnostic tale. In general systems theory, though, we acknowledge the sun, and it's very important that we do as a source of energy, and nature in general, but just the fact that the cosmos is where our energy comes from, and that's really all we have. We have three things, really: time, energy, and intelligence. Intelligence means the ability to think and plan ahead, to adapt mentally, and then retrain ourselves metaphysically, you could say. That's an important aspect of the human animal. But we're not the only ones to use technology. In fact, I just wanted to mention Wikipedia does have a Design Science Revolution page. There's a Design Science page, but then there's also the Revolution page, which I didn't have anything to deal with. I think I mentioned that already. But it does link to the Synergetics page. But also, I wanted to just reinforce again Fuller's meaning of technology. It doesn't mean what you might think it means. It's like, oh, he just thinks that technology will solve all our problems. He's just one of those technocrats. That's a common criticism. But it's best if you understand his vocabulary. And as we scroll down here, he stressed that by utilizing these natural principles of technology, industrial civilization could transform from an extractive to a regenerative force within the context of Earth's ecosystems. Natural principles of technology, that should give you a little bit of a hint. Universe is technology. See, he's not using it, the word technology, quite the same way that standard writers do, or writers in standard written English. This is not English, you could say, just because to say a sentence like, the technology evolved by man is thus far amateurish compared to the elegance of non-humanly contrived regeneration. See, that's kind of outside what we're used to, and he addresses that in the next sentence. Man does not spontaneously recognize technology other than his own, so he speaks of the rest as something he ignorantly calls nature, okay? So he's challenging our everyday usage patterns, which is something he was good at throughout his life, kind of why I think of him as a strong writer, because he deliberately changes the meanings of words the way strong writers do. So the next thing I want to talk about is how to use the software at the GitHub website, Python 5 subdirectory 4D solutions. And for example, the tetravolume PY, we've talked about it before, but I want to draw your attention to the unit tests to make it more obvious how to read Python, for example. There is class triangle and class tetrahedron in there. Both of them work by taking edge links. So the 6 edge links of a tetrahedron, you pass them in a certain order. Pick any vertex. The 3 emanating from there are A, B, and C. And then you go around the base, starting from where A hits the base, and call those D, E, F. So you take those links and mash them together, and you come back with the volume. Now I have a make tet where you can give it any 3 edges from a common vertex of a regular tetrahedron in terms of vectors, and it'll figure out the 4th face. It's determined. It'll close the lid for you, and from there it gets the 6 lengths and goes up and checks out what the volume is in both IVM volume and XYZ volume. So that's what I want to get back to here, but the triangle, just for completeness, does the same thing in a triangle, takes 3 edges. So you may have heard of Heron's formula. The thing that might confuse you is what I'm doing here is I'm assuming that the unit control length 1 in the IVM is really 2 with respect to XYZ. And I think the best way to explain that after we scroll through some unit tests here is a picture I'm about to switch to. But here we've got the triangle being tested, for example, and what areas do I expect if, say, all the edges are D, which is the diameter of an IVM sphere packed together, FCC, right? You've got 2 radii meeting at a kissing point. We call that 2R or D. And it's that what we call a unit volume, the tetrahedron with those edges. And you could say those edges are 1 if you're talking in D units. But then when we switch to XYZ and ask what's the value of that same area in XYZ units, I'll tend to go to 2 in that case as the length D, and R, radius of those unit radius spheres, is the length R. Now let's make that a little more clear by switching back to Chrome here. This is what we call a tetrabook. It's all edges 2 that you see in blue here. Even the green edges, except for the one that's stretchy, are edge 2 or D. And really it's just a book with triangular book covers open flat at 180 degrees on the table with a single page, a single flap. It's always stiff, and it's able to go left, right, and make like an arc so that its tip will line up with the book covers on either side. And that defines a sixth edge on both of these tetrahedron if you draw them as complementary. Now I'm drawing two tetrahedron as like separate. There's the one where the page is standing straight up. And I want to point out, if you do the computations, you'll find that the volume of that tetrahedron, think of pouring water from one to the other, this right tetrahedron with edges 2 except for quote-unquote the hypotenuse has the same volume as the XYZ cube does over here with edges radius r, 1. That's the XYZ 1 and the XYZ volume 1. Jump over to synergetics. This guy is the same volume, this right tetrahedron. But that's not our unit of volume in synergetics. You have to arc this down either way so that you get a regular tetrahedron, which in terms of relative volume, if the one standing straight up is 1, then the one I'm talking about, the regular one, is going to have square root of 8/9 or second root of 8/9 as its volume. But we could call that volume 1, right? So in my YouTube channel, if you go back to where I describe this tetrabook in terms of an animation, there I'm starting to talk there. Okay, that doesn't usually work. All right, so this is I have the actual animation of the tetrabook going back and forth a little bit in this one. I think somewhere in here. There we go. So standing straight up, a right angle tetrahedron, its volume would be greater than that of the regular tetrahedron, which is our unit of volume in synergetics. So you can see the difference there. Straight up and 60 degrees. Straight up and 60 degrees. So that's what we call the ratio between those two volumes. Again, is what we call the synergetics constant, and it's how we like convert the currency between XYZ units of volume or unit cubes and synergetics units of volume, which are unit tetrahedra. So I just wanted to end, first of all, check out the general systems theory pages at grunch.net. Read some of these articles. There's one in, let's see, does that Washington Post link still work? I always want to know if these newspapers have kept consistent URLs over the years, because it's a real pain when people rearrange all their HTML, all their links. They think no one dares link to their stuff from directly into their inner pages, so they think, oh, well, the front page is still the same. I can do whatever I want inside, but that's really, not very public-minded to always be changing those URLs. But that passed the test. Thank you, Washington Post. Okay, on to the next one. What I wanted to point out, first of all, that we do acknowledge the sun. If you read some economics and they're talking about taxes and who pays for what and where's the money going to come from, and they go on for too many pages without acknowledging that humans are not the source of all wealth. If that's it, if that's what they say, you should think this is Marxist, even if they call themselves anti-Marxist and they don't actually think they're Marxist. If they think the source of all value is human labor, I would call that Marxist, and I'd also call that wrong, right? Because humans, we don't even know how to make ourselves. Like, we give birth, but we don't know how to design, manufacture humans. And yet we consider ourselves valuable, but we're not the product of human labor. Yes, women's labor, in terms of giving birth, that's true labor, that's work. But it's not like anybody can take credit for making humans, right, in terms of designing and putting them out there. And that's true of wealth in general. It's not of our doing. It's technology that we don't know how to duplicate, because we don't have technology like that. We have weaker technology, but we do our best, right? So I wanted to point out that we do think in terms of movie making all the way back to the beginning of this stuff. The global university, they weren't trying to make money with the pyramids. They weren't trying to make money, with any of the wars. except for a few people, right? But we burn through energy like crazy. It's because we're always getting more from where? The banks? No, from the sun. The sun is giving us our intelligence, or not our intelligence maybe, but it's giving us our energy in various direct and indirect ways, and then we channel it. We make the water wheels, the dams, the wires from the dams to the cities with our intelligence. We figure out certain circuits, and that's what we call the human economy. That's what we create as the economy. But in GST, we're not really that respectful of the economics that's been passed down to us as a pseudo or quasi science. It doesn't talk enough about the true cosmic sort of situation of human beings. It takes that for granted and then ignores it, and that's a problem. So GST, we're always thinking in terms of making movies because we move, right? Your life is a scenario. You're in a time tunnel burning energy at whatever rate you do. As a human body, if you think of yourself just in those terms, you're like a 150-watt bulb at the most. No matter how rich or poor you are, you basically are a light bulb in terms of the energy you burn through, regardless of your lifestyle, regardless of how much caviar and champagne you eat, you're still burning through X number of watts. So in terms of keeping X billions of people alive on the planet, it takes a certain amount of wattage to do that, to keep the light bulbs burning. Now in banking, there's this fear of leakage, as I call it, where it's like, well, you got to pay back whatever you get and then some. And imagine if the sun really were like that. It's like we can only get sunlight if we agree to pay it back with interest. And yet sun is our currency, energy. Energy in general, time, and intelligence are the three things that we have, right? So do send me your questions if you like, if I'm still around to answer them. But do take the time, if you can, to read through these materials, even if you can just stop the video here and watch it that way, because this website is not guaranteed to always be there. It might get hacked or something could happen. So good luck, and we'll talk to you next time.